Hello and welcome to News Laundry. Today we're going to be talking about someone who was an active member of the student wing of the Communist Party of India and who went on to become the Prime Minister of India, not once but twice. And we're going to be talking about him with Ullekh. Ullekh, welcome to News Laundry.
Thank you.
Ullekh has written this book, The Untold Vajpayee. And it is a very special book. I'm not just saying it because I'm interviewing him. First of all, full disclosure, Ullekh happened to write a review for my book a couple of years ago. Now, this book is special because it, not to use the cliche, but it unmasks Vajpayee, and that is precisely why it's titled The Untold Vajpayee. But it's not special because of that. It is special because if a person with a right-wing leaning had written something on Vajpayee, this book would have been half the size, because everything unkind about Vajpayee would have been omitted. And it goes the same if a person with a left-wing ideology would have written something on Vajpayee. Again, it would have been half the size, because everything kind to Vajpayee would have been omitted. So this is just the right size, and the person who's written it is Ullekh, who, if I can call him, is wingless, neither right-wing nor left-wing.
You're right, Anand.
Okay, right. And Ullekh has been a journalist for close to about 1.5 decades. So
Yeah.
And he started with Economic Times.
Before that, with PTI.
With PTI.
I worked with the Economic Times for a long time. Yeah.
Right. And after Economic Times, you joined Open magazine, and now you are with Open right now.
Yeah.
So Ullekh, to begin with, what's a nice communist lad like Vajpayee doing in the RSS?
You know, it's an interesting thing. Even while he was a member of the ASF, which is a student feeder organization of the CPI, he used to be associated with RSS. So perhaps that explains, that how easy or how he was early on modified or tuned to straddle the fence. But more than that, I think, it was...
Sorry to interrupt, but I think I found that, that's the reason why I began the interview with that. I thought that itself was a very nice anecdote about him. Didn't that kind of persona carry on with him throughout his life, that it was very difficult to define him, starting off with the CPI SFI wing, and then joining the RSS. And in fact, even after he left the post of Prime Ministership, many people found it difficult to define what the true Vajpayee was. I thought it fascinating that it's not just the defining is difficult in his last couple of decades. It's been there for like 70, 80 odd years.
I think except Mahatma Gandhi, everybody seemed to have influenced him, and he was actively part of many of the organizations, also the political themes of different times that he had lived in. He used to attend RSS shakas even as a child, and then veered, for a brief period towards communism, and communism in the sense that veered towards a student wing of the CPI. I think internationally communism had momentum going in those days, and which explained why he was enamored of that movement and wanted to join. But that was a brief period in his life. But more importantly, if you were asking me about this two-faced or two sides, Vajpayee's persona, I think he was able to, have both these sides or straddle these two sides, and to a large extent, go on with these two beliefs, one liberal and the other hardcore right wing for a long time, and maybe throughout his life even now. So more importantly, his transformation was from hardcore RSS fiery, anti-Muslim orator to someone who was far more Nehruvian, secular, liberal, and so on. But he often
anti-Muslim. You say anti-Muslim.
Anti-Muslim because there are chapters of history that are not talked about him. One is Nelly massacre of 1983. He made a very acerbic, very caustic, and also an explosive speech in Assam day before the Nelli massacre took place, and in Parliament he was later on, many years later in 1996, was attacked by Indrajit Gupta, who was a tall CPI leader and parliamentarian of the time, for triggering of the Nelli massacre and the riots that happened in Assam in 1983, which showed that though he had shed his hardcore right-winger image, the hardliner image over time, thanks to influences of Nehru and a lot of other people, and also the influence of Parliament. Parliament had a lot of influence on him. For any small town politician or a person who comes to Delhi and becomes part of Lutyens' culture, and also the Parliament culture of that time, which had such tall figures like Nehru, Swab, highly sophisticated people. He was deeply influenced and enamored of these people. That came later.
So during the time of his interactions with Nehru in the Parliament, was he ever critical of Nehru, or was Nehru ever critical of Vajpayee?
Vajpayee has always been critical of Nehru, and even after the war with China, after which Nehru was completely crestfallen, Vajpayee went to meet along with his two other MPs. They had a handful of MPs that time. Of Jansangh. He went to meet Nehru. Nehru, being the liberal politician that he was, immediately agreed to have discussions on what happened and why was the war such a sham, and also the kind of humiliation that India had to face in the global scenario. Nehru agreed to that debate, and one of the most bitter critics of Nehru in the debate that followed was Vajpayee. He used his chaste Hindi, he used to speak in chaste Hindi, and out of respect for him, Vajpayee used to break the habit of speaking in English and used to even speak in Hindi.
Right.
Vajpayee had a lot of admiration for Nehru, but that never stopped him from speaking out against Nehru.
So do you think the culture that was pervasive during the 50s and the 60s in the Parliament, we have probably lost a lot of that culture?
Of course, very much. Because so
there was a respect for, even if you were an adversary.
Since 1952, since the time we had Lok Sabha, we had Parliament, Nehru used to respect all the opposition leaders, and he used to make it a point to appear when top leaders, senior leaders of rival political parties used to make a speech. For instance, when A.K. Gopalan of the CPI, Undivided Party, used to make speeches, he, despite all the hectic schedule, that he made it a point to attend, and it's said that he used to even go for morning walks with these people. So he was a Democrat, he was a true liberal, whether we like it or not, whether no matter the kind of mistakes that he may have made over time, he ruled for a long time. So he had that kind of a great respect for political opponents.
And it rubbed off on Vajpayee?
Very much, very much.
Okay. Now we'll try and go chronologically because that's one way to decipher Atal Bihari Vajpayee's life. So you talk about his attempts in his younger days to enter politics, and you talk that Rajmata Scindia, we can call her Rajmata because at that point of time the privy persons were still there, had a tremendous influence on him. What the image that I got from the book was that it was not that they were friends, that he was there was an element of subservience in, or maybe even worship that Vajpayee had for Scindia.
Very much. And I quote,
even touch the feet.
I quoted an unnamed BJP leader, ABVP leader of the time in the 70s, who said Vajpayee admitted to him that he is what he was at that time, all because of the Scindia family and especially Rajamata. Scindia family had.
And if I'm not mistaken, his first Lok Sabha election, he said, "I'm going to be elected because Scindia has canvassed for me." Yeah.
That he won in 1957, and before that, if you look at his education, it was sponsored by the Scindia family.
Right.
When he shifted from Gwalior to DAV College in Kanpur, when he did his masters in political science, in which he became a topper. The whole education was sponsored by the Scindia family. In those days, it was a late 1950s or early 50s. It was, and he was provided a monthly allotment stipend of rupees 75.
Yes,
which at that time was a princely sum.
Right. So, I mean, the thing I'm trying to get at is he joins politics, and I mean through the munificence, if I can call it, of Rajmata Scindia, and then there is this great tussle, because at that point of time we had BJS, Bharatiya Jan Sangh, and you go at length describing that it wasn't all hunky dory, in the sense that he wasn't well liked by everyone, despite his endearing personality. Tell us about that. I mean, so there were actually even at that point of time when he wasn't very popular. I mean, as a political leader, because obviously under the shadow of the Congress. There were attempts to kind of put a brake on his political career. Within the Bharatiya Jan Sangh.
He came into politics. Even when he came into politics, he had displayed that astounding ability for great oratory, and he was early on itself, within a few months or years of him joining politics, he had proved to everyone concerned that he had unbeatable popularity. RSS always wanted a face for its political arm that appealed to a wider section of people. They didn't want people like them, who probably was slightly in politically incorrect terms rustic, but rather someone who appealed to a large section of people. And then Vajpayee proved to be a price catch for them, and then very early on even satsang chalaks of the order of the kind of Guruji Golwalkar insisted that in 1957 elections they had posters in which, along with other leaders, there was also a photograph of Vajpayee, which did not go down well with people in BJS and others who were senior to him and who thought that they had done far more hard work. And Vajpayee was never a hard worker, and not someone who used to enthuse grassroots level workers to work very hard, or someone who had spent so much time working for the people, or working among the people. He was someone who was very good with speeches, and he attracted a lot of people thanks to that ability.
Could one of the antagonism towards him, I mean that's the gist I got from the book, was because he was not a child of partition, unlike Advani and unlike Arun Shourie, and of course Arun Shourie much later, but Advani was come from Pakistan, whereas Vajpayee was kind of, if I can call it, homegrown.
That's
undercurrent was running through?
That's a very interesting observation, and because one of his greatest rivals, Balraj Madok, is a child of partition.
Yeah, I wanted to come to that.
So, and BJS and RSS also, the first of the political goals was to attract people who had come from Pakistan to the fold, which they thought was an easy thing to do, to endear itself to people who had suffered from partition. So that was a huge success. And people who had, let's not forget that people who had come from there were far more committed to the so-called Hindutva cause and the majoritarian politics of the RSS than Vajpayee would ever be. Of course, there would have been that kind of difference of opinion between them, but Advani, who was also a child of partition, was one of Vajpayee's trusted lieutenants all through. And It was, I mean, Vajpayee was an astute manipulator even within his party, and he knew how to maneuver and outmaneuver people.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then
as you say, so if in the book, if somebody was critical of his personal life on his face, he would kind of laugh it off, but never forget.
yeah,
Let's talk about his personal life. Not much is known, and I dare say if somebody, and I repeat that again, if somebody who's from the right wing were to have written a lot of stuff that you've written, some of it explosive, about his personal life, I dare say this book would have probably wouldn't have come to the fore. Is it true that and it was his college sweetheart, right?
Yeah,
that he,
yeah.
But she married, and they still stayed with
yeah,
Vajpayee.
together.
What was the
I think,
I mean, I would say, I mean, even in today's time, that would be daring.
yeah.
In those times, would have been probably scandalous.
Yeah, Vajpayee in politics and outside of it, even in his personal life, he lived on his own terms, and it was a very unconventional relationship that he had with Mrs. Kaul and family. And he used to stay with them in on Ramjas College campus, and then after that, after he became a member of parliament in 1957,
They shifted.
the family shifted to his place, and it is no secret that he had an affair with her, and he never tried to hide it, but he never openly talked about it. So, I mean, if you dig
But
up,
there have been, I mean, as you quote, there have been people who've commented on that, even going so far as to say that the foster daughter was actually Vajpayee's real daughter.
yeah, I mean, see, can you imagine?
Sorry, I'm not just trying to get his book banned. So.
See, you can't, can you expect the RSS types of even today, I mean, forget of that time,
Yeah.
Approving of that kind of a relationship of its leader, so which is why he was hated by a section of the RSS, but he didn't care too much about it. And
So that's one of the reasons why I mentioned the Rajmata, Scindia, is, and you hint this, could his close association with the royalty have given him this confidence to kind of, I mean, he was, even though you said, he came from a small town, he had that much of confidence that he could actually brush people off and not care about.
he also had the confidence that come what may, even the RSS, which
I mean, I wouldn't call it debauchery, but I mean, as royalty goes, I mean, this is something that the royalty is very adept at. Wouldn't you agree?
yeah.
So,
I mean, he must. I'm sure he had. That kind of influence was certainly there, and also the support of the royal family. He counted on their support, and more than that, he was very sure of himself, like mostly the Brahmins from Uttar Pradesh, and also from that region, who had certain kind of confidence that they had at that time. Politics of the time was much different. You could get away doing many things when you are a Brahmin from that area, which was true. But also he knew very well that RSS, he had the support of the top leadership of the RSS, whatever leaders in the lower ranks would have ranted about or complained about him. Also, he was a very brave man. I've also narrated how he tried to how he successfully saved the lives of taxi drivers who were about to be attacked by a mob in 1984.
yes, in fact, we'll come to that chronologically.
And also a lot of other things that prove how brave he was.
Yeah.
So
I mean, right now we're just focusing on the early Vajpayee, and then we'll come to his political life. So one of the things that also struck me was that you mentioned that there were many in the BJ at that point of time, Jan Sangh and the RSS, who were for Akhand Bharat. At the same time, many of the prominent leaders were actually believers and proponents of the two-nation theory. In fact, was it Shyama Prasad Mukherjee who said that, who actually celebrated, Deen Dayal Upadhyay celebrated the creation of Bangladesh and of Pakistan. Where did Vajpayee stand as far as Akhand Bharat and two-nation theory stood?
Vajpayee, I mean, as when you look at the late Vajpayee, he had not taken very strong, he never had strong opinions on ideological positions. So, but he was
a fan of Savarkar.
He was a fan of Savarkar. He was also very close. He worked very closely with Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, and he shared at that time when he worked closely with Shyama Prasad Mukherjee the ideals that he stood for. And then, of course, he experimented with different people, the politics of different people he was associated with.
Yeah, this is what actually shines through his persona. This is like, I mean, of course, biography is probably, the art of knowing when to pop a halo on over your head and when to remove it. One of the things that where I would put a halo on Vajpayee's head is he was so open about, kind of rejecting and accepting not just ideologies, maybe principles from across the spectrum.
Yeah, that is true. And
this would, I dare say, it wouldn't happen today. People would be scared to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you would. It's easy to get attacked for changing your opinion, saying this is what you said 5 years ago. He never cared.
Yeah.
He was one of the topmost proponents of the Swadeshi cause, and later on he became someone who helped deepen
opposed that thing.
Opposed and also helped deepen the economic liberalization process started by Narasimha Rao while he was in power. So I think he didn't care, and it was so brave of him to have experimented, also rejected old norms, and then which explains why he was he was acceptable to a larger rainbow coalition, and much more than any other member of his party.
Right. So let's come to Nehru exits and enters Indira, and they had at least in the initial stages, they had a nice relationship.
Yeah.
Indira had a respect for Vajpayee. No doubt, probably Nehru would have informed her about her.
Yeah.
But then came, I think, in the 4th Lok Sabha, one of the debates where it was no holds barred. Vajpayee went after Indira, and Indira came back and went after him in return.
Yeah.
That was the first time anybody called anybody else a communal on the house of the. Tell us about that. I mean, what happened?
I think Vajpayee, because he was very much associated with the RSS, and also he had worked with the Bharatiya Jansangh, in which the majority that called the shots were hardliners. He often made brief excursions to prove that he was no less a hardliner than others. Also to perhaps he showed restraint, but at times he let go. So in this particular occasion, that Mrs. Gandhi was deeply disturbed by certain statements that Vajpayee made in the 4th Lok Sabha, and she decided to take him on, though she could have deputed someone else in the party to do that. And if after listening or reading closely the exchanges between the two, I mean, you have to admire the fact that despite Vajpayee being such a great orator, in terms of the content, the substance of it, Mrs. Gandhi had an upper hand.
And she said these comments should not be removed because I want people to know about the truth about the RSS.
Yeah.
And I think after that, I think Vajpayee was a bit taken aback. He wasn't expecting
which is why
the personality of Indira.
Vajpayee, thanks to his oratorial skills and as a rhetorician and also a polemicist, he always managed to have the upper hand. He always had the edge over his rivals, especially in parliament, which explains why he always liked being in parliament. That the special attraction that parliament held for politicians, it was much more special for Vajpayee, and he always understood it was the turf in which he excelled the most. But at this point of time, on this occasion, he had to beat retreat. That was the impression I got after going through. I don't want to make a judgment on his lack of substance or anything like that, but Mrs. Gandhi had an upper hand.
And just to clarify, once and for all, did he call Indira Durga? After
no, because it's after the 1970.
He denied it, I think, much later.
No, he denied it much later. He was asked in a show in a television show by
Rajat
Sharma.
Rajat Sharma,
So before that, when Pupul Jekar wrote a book on Indira Gandhi, she approached Vajpayee to ask whether did you ever call Mrs. Gandhi Durga? So he was extremely reverential about Mrs. Gandhi, especially after the victory in the war with Pakistan in 1971, after the creation of Bangladesh. But he didn't. He denied, and I've searched for documents and parliamentary papers. I've not been able to find any such mention.
Right. So again, then comes emergency, and all his part admiration for Indira this goes away. Tell us about that. He was in he and Advani were in Bangalore, right?
Yeah. So they were arrested. They were approached by policemen, and they all Advani and him and some of his comrades in arms decided they'll court arrest, and instead of running away from the scene, they knew this was going to happen. But Vajpayee, after a few days, he took ill, and he had to be shifted to Delhi, to AIIMS first for treatment. And
of course, his role before the onset of emergency, I mean, was he as vociferous in asking for a quote unquote revolution as JP was? I mean, was he?
No, he was along with Advani. He was very much instrumental in making in attracting Jayaprakash Narayan, who had come back from the US with socialist thoughts and who was an out and out socialist. And others, and at one point even Jayaprakash Narayan said that my impression of the RSS and the Bharatiya Jansangh stands completely changed.
Yes.
I stand corrected. Yes. So these people, I mean, Advani would have played a greater role, but Vajpayee's role was no less.
So to talk about RSS a little bit here, at that point of time, correct me if I'm wrong, there was no Vishwa Hindu Parishad associated with RSS in the 50s and 60s. There was no Bajrang Dal. So the only criticism of RSS you could have was the criticism of RSS per se, not these other affiliated bodies.
There was Hindu Mahasabha, and they had difference of opinion.
But I think RSS was antithetical to, I mean, they were actually at loggerheads, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, and Savarkar, of course, was an institution by himself who did not always toe the line of the RSS.
I mean, what I mean is, in the current scenario, when you talk of RSS, immediately the first criticism that comes is obviously their allegiance and the groups that they have, and they're much more easy to, because they're in your face, they're violent, they're easy to criticize. In those days, it was just the RSS. So maybe the criticism was more at a philosophical level, and that is why people were more receptive to the RSS thoughts and the ideology. Would you say that's one of the reasons why the JP movement and JP per se also were?
JP, I mean, everyone believed, because through media and through government propaganda, or rather, there was an element of truth in that Nathuram Vinayak Godse, the assassin of Mahatma Gandhi, had long association with RSS, which explains why RSS could not grow as fast as it could have grown after the death of assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. So that was the biggest blot on the RSS, that this is a party that celebrated the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi and also had within its fold a person who killed Mahatma Gandhi, that is Nathuram Vinayak Godse. And if you go through the interviews that his brother had given, later, that Gopal Godse had said that, so he had said several times that Nathuram Vinayak Godse was very much associated with RSS, and it was only to avoid embarrassment to Guruji Golwalkar and Hedgewar and the leaders of the time, that I think Hedgewar was dead, it was Golwalkar especially. It was to avoid embarrassment to the RSS that they held back.
So
he held back.
Would you categorize Vajpayee as a Gandhian?
No, Gandhi is one politician that perhaps Vajpayee did not have much to do with. It probably, you know.
I found it strange that, as you mentioned, maybe you can elaborate on that, he had more admiration for Nehru than he had for Gandhi.
Of course, because Nehru wasn't, it's a different thing, because, you know, when.
Maybe interaction with him personally.
Yeah, that was there. And in the initial years of political life of Vajpayee, when India had gone through a lot of political churning after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, Vajpayee was associated with the RSS and later with Janasangh, which did not want anything to do with Gandhi. But afterwards, once he became parliamentarian in 1957, and later on when he started interacting with other leaders in parliament, you know, parliament is a place where politicians go through a lot of churning. It's a place where from as opposed to grassroots political work, your association with your political rivals is far more smooth as opposed to the other being very acerbic, very rough. So then and also the attraction is deep, you know, once you come to parliament. In those days, you know, much more than it is now, you had such great parliamentarians, very sophisticated politicians, and you know, who were icons in the freedom struggle, and you know, evidently his speech after the death of Nehru, and also right, G.B. Pant, it's I don't think I haven't listened to any speech, very touching speeches that he had made about their contribution. And
so, moving swiftly on, what's this about Vajpayee loyalists, Advani, the Ayodhya temple, and the Ayatollah?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't think it has been written about before I wrote in this book.
Yes, I had never heard it. And
it's not been written about. It's that, you know, Advani wanted to solve the Ayodhya issue. He had some men in place to make it happen, and some of them very shrewd, very clever people. They decided to approach the Ayatollahs of Iran.
This you're talking about which year? You talking about?
This was in early 2000.
Yeah, when they were the government.
When they were in the government. So maybe 2003 or 2002. So
this was before the verdict, Ayodhya verdict, and before the case
before
went to
the
Supreme Court.
Before the case went on. So they tried to influence the Ayatollahs with the hope that they would be, the Ayatollahs being, you know, considered high seat of wisdom by the Shias of India, especially Uttar Pradesh, would be able to influence the Shia community in India to say that this land where Babri Masjid once stood does not belong to us, because there used to be a place of worship before that, you know, which was of the Hindu faith.
Do you think Mr. Advani was in direct contact with the Ayatollahs?
He was not in direct contact, but the people who he had, who were his loyalists, were in direct contact. And
were those part of the government?
Some of them were part of the government. Even intelligence agencies were involved, and some others were not. Key people may not have been directly linked to the parliament, linked to the government, and they travelled to Tehran, and following which some of those top religious leaders had paid a visit to India. But then, you know, what happened was people who sensed it that there would be a solution to this, because the Shia belief, they tried to cash in on the Shia belief that, because, you know, in the first place, Babri Masjid was built by a Shia general of Babur. Mm-hmm. So according to all rules and guidelines, it's a land owned by the Shias. Only if the Shias did not make a claim did it go to the Sunnis.
Right.
So in a court of law, if the Shias had said that this is our land and we don't want it, let them build a temple, that was what Advani was looking for.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And the reason why this has been a secret till now?
maybe people who worked closely with that did not want to embarrass others. This whoever
Vajpayee ji was in the know?
Vajpayee ji was not in the know until the last. He came, probably he must have come to know about it, but he once his
But
loyalists.
the initiative was of Advani.
Advani, and one of those senior intelligence officers who knew about it told me Vajpayee was not in the loop until everything was known to people around in the government. And
So what happened?
what happened was, interestingly, I mean, I don't know whether this was because Vajpayee had an interest in that or not, but Vajpayee loyalists thought that this would give Advani an edge. Also, the credit for solving the Ayodhya crisis would go to Advani.
Right.
And so they immediately involved a lot of people and and made it a chaotic scene. A lot of people with a lot of interest were brought in to discuss the issue, which shouldn't have been the way it should have been handled. So what happened later was people started claiming that we should solve other contentious issues as well, like those in Mathura and other places, in a similar way, which makes no sense.
Right.
So that and then in the confusion that prevailed afterwards, this the whole deal fell through.
I see.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I think there are a lot of other sides to there are other arguments that you can bring up. One is that this would have led to a lot of Shia unrest, a lot of Muslim resentment, that this was a ruse that was used to hoodwink them and things like that. But again, once
this was a possible
this was a possible scenario, and if that had happened, Advani would have got all the credit, and somebody did not want Advani to get the credit.
Now, you also talk in your book about a source. You talked to a BJP minister who has confided in you that Vajpayee was worried he might be unseated as the Prime Minister of India.
Yeah.
That's big. Disclose the source.
I can't disclose. A lot of living people are involved. Maybe much later people will be able to talk about it, or some documents might appear. But as of now, what I can say is that Vajpayee wasn't the most preferred leader at that time for the Americans, because he had, like the evidence came later, when the entire cabinet and the official defense establishment thought that it was wise for India to send its arms, its army, the soldiers and everyone to Iraq to fight along with the Americans and the British and French forces. Vajpayee was the only one who said no.
In fact, he talked to a communist party member.
He talked to a lot of people, but he was
said,
right.
Why don't you protest?
In hindsight, he was right.
Yeah.
And we know what happened in Iraq and what Iraq is now. And to have sent our soldiers to, and interestingly, the leader writers of the time, we have.
But he did accept the refueling.
Yeah, he did. I mean, it was a small thing, compared with this had to do with the lives of our people, and also to do with the future of this country. But interestingly, a lot of leader writers of the time who are still there, who are pro-American, who lobby for American interests in India, kept arguing that this is the last opportunity for us to have a slice of global power and things like that, and I don't know what happened to them afterwards. We still see them around, but despite all that pressure from the media, from these power groups and pressure groups, and from within the majority of his cabinet and also the defense establishment, he decided not to send. So this sent troops to Iraq. So he was, and remember, and an article had appeared in the Time magazine before that, featuring everything about his poor health and him as a alcoholic who drank so much, and someone who is not in control of himself, and someone who was lost, and very much semi quasi brain dead kind of person. So even that had to do with creation of a perception that this was not a man fit to govern India.
talking about that, you talk about an incident where he refused to get a CT scan.
No, that is it. Now, let me finish this part about, and this minister, I mean, Vajpayee averted the danger and all these things, because the formula was that the second in command at the time, Advani, that is what reportedly Vajpayee thought would become the Prime Minister, and two of his other lieutenants, Jaswant Singh and George Fernandez, would become Deputy Prime Ministers. And by doing that, Advani would get support from these two others, maybe more. So this was the perception that, according to this unnamed minister, that Vajpayee had. So Vajpayee immediately did, he was, as I said earlier, he was adept at outmaneuvering others in his own style, so he did it and he averted this crisis. And about this CT scan thing, it was around.
That's fascinating, because
that's also, one of his friends, one of his very close friends told me that he felt wobbly at one point, and the doctors advised that he go for a brain scan. So he went to the hospital, and then he decided, seeing the machine, that I'm not going to go into this machine. So some 5 years or 6 years later, in 2009, he suffered a massive stroke, incapacitated him. It was a debilitating thing. So
did you try and get in touch with him for writing this biography?
No, I mean, even if I tried getting in touch with the family, and I was in touch with the family, but he was, he can't speak.
Right. But you talk about an incident where the letter of Manishankar Iyer was read out to him, and he appreciated that.
That's a quote from that I attributed to Manishankar Iyer, and that Manishankar Iyer had written an edit about how much he missed Vajpayee in these times when.
Now, this is one strange thing that many people, many on the left and the Congress say about this present government. They almost, to the extent of saying, oh, what wonderful days NDA 1 was compared to NDA 2, when we didn't have so much of this, according to them, intolerance and, all these kinds of things going on. But if you go back and you revisit that time, 98 to 2004, and if you read the papers and everything that was going on, it was almost a carbon copy of the protests that they're doing now.
Yeah.
So is it just, in retrospect, you find that, these guys are not eulogizing Vajpayee's regime, but they're being kind to him right now because Modi is a bigger threat to them. But when Vajpayee was there, they were equally opposed to him at that point of time, and his government.
Yeah, comparing these two generations of BJP leaders, to say that they were wiser, and now you have people with no respect for rule of law around. I don't want to engage in that, but I'll say one thing. It's a journalistic preoccupation. It could be a preoccupation with a lot of so-called experts and political analysts. But in the RSS, in the BJP, there was two schools of thought originally, that one that said, until you capture political power through electoral means, you don't bare your fangs, you don't show what you are. And the other one that said, you start the game of polarization early on, so that you come clean, and then you expose yourself and what your agendas are. And Vajpayee, of course, to my best of knowledge, belonged to the former. So what would have Vajpayee done if he had an absolute majority in parliament?
Yes.
It's something that is for speculation. We can't. So now you have a government for the first time after 1984, in which the ruling party has a majority on its own. The other thing, but there is a difference that you can point out. Vajpayee had a long exposure to the ways of Delhi and its politics, the power.
In fact, because we're running out of time, Ullekh, so we just wanted a couple of more questions. One was, one of the criticisms of the Vajpayee regime by the BJP supporters of the present regime is that Vajpayee and Advani and all these people were compromised through a quid pro quo with the Congress, and they were too much in this Lutyens business, that a lot of things happened that would not pass by Modi right now. A, do you think that's true? And B, what is the role that Vajpayee played in hiding things about Bofors? And C, is there any truth to the fact that Rahul Gandhi was let off by Advani, as many speculations go, and Vajpayee had a hand in that?
You know, these are mostly speculation,
Yeah.
but I can say one
But
thing.
as a journalist,
You know, as a journalist, what I can say is that quid pro quo between the Congress and the BJP, I don't think that was the major hurdle. You know, the
but
biggest.
didn't Digvijay Singh also mention this in passing, saying that, oh, we did nothing against your son-in-law, you know, why are you...
That's very much true, because, you know, like, but that happened only towards the latest years of the last years of Vajpayee rule, in which his son-in-law also came into prominence, also came to hog the limelight for all the bad reasons. But initially,
about
I
Bofors,
think,
what do you
you
think?
know, yeah, I mean, of course, you know, like, they were busy handling the Rainbow coalition that was they were the coalition leader of you know, some 14-member party alliance. So you had a lot of interest to protect, and which perhaps, you know, may have been closely linked to that of the Congress as well. You know,
so there is a element of truth to
there
that. I mean, this is exactly what we saw, what Manmohan Singh was, this coalition dharma.
There is certainly an element of truth there, but, you know, how can we say that, you know, there isn't any quid pro quo now? Have we any reasons to believe otherwise?
Yeah.
So far.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think, you know, like I was saying, that Vajpayee had long years of experience in Delhi. That made a lot of difference. But now we have someone who, despite having been well travelled and in the US, and also had a stint as General Secretary of the BJP in Delhi, Narendra Modi is basically a provincial politician until he became the Prime Minister.
So you talk about the Goa meeting. So let me just ask you straight up. Did Vajpayee like Narendra Modi?
Not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
Did Modi like Atal
That we
Bihari
don't know.
Vajpayee?
You know,
we don't know that.
yeah, we
but
don't
talk a little bit, very briefly, because we're running out of time. Why didn't Vajpayee like Narendra Modi?
You know, Vajpayee thought was that, you know, it was ideologically he wouldn't have bothered too much, but Vajpayee thought Modi's whatever Modi reportedly did, his silence and whatnot, you know, which have now been rejected by tribunals and courts and all,
SIT,
had brought a lot of shame to him, and also.
But at that interview, you know, where he said Raj Dharm ka palan karo, and then Mr. Modi said wahi to kar rahe hain sahab,
So
and he agreed with that.
No, he agreed
So
with that
what was
because
this,
you know, he agreed with that because knowing, you know, Vajpayee is a
this
person.
carrot and stick business.
Vajpayee is not someone who would have countered him. Vajpayee is not someone who would have picked up fight with him at that moment. It was Modi who was being aggressive. So he thought perhaps let his aggression prevail. It was as if he was submitting himself, or he was resigning to the fate of kind of a questioning from a junior leader. And all those people I've had chat with on Vajpayee, especially those in the party, thought that Vajpayee never really, towards the end of, you know, I'm talking about late Vajpayee, you know, towards the end of his political career, and also after he became Prime Minister, he never wanted to say things in which he was questioned by his juniors. So this shows a lack, more than agreement with him, sort of you know, resigning impact,
ambivalence towards
ambivalence to what he.
Do you think there was a person like Amit Shah in Vajpayee's government, or you know, at that point of time?
No, BJP had
Pramod Mahajan probably
Pramod Mahajan and such leaders, and he didn't have. I mean, I don't think Vajpayee ever tried to experiment with good cop, bad cop thing, except you know, maybe. I mean, at that level, in those days, perhaps that was like Vajpayee
I mean, the
and
kind
Advani.
of things that we are right.
Vajpayee and Advani was like that because Advani was seen as the hardliner and the
A
bad
hawk,
cop.
yeah, but not really kind of a
Yeah, I mean, like things have changed.
part sparrow, part falcon.
They did what they could afford to do back then, and now we have people who.
But the kind of things that we're seeing right now, I mean, the emphasis, for example, beef ban. Of course, it's been banned by Congress, but I mean, the kind of what would Vajpayee have done, or would he have approved of this beef?
No, I don't think
he was a non-vegetarian.
He was a non-vegetarian, and as from conversations I have had with some of his closest friends who have had dined with him, that they disclosed to me that he used to eat buffalo meat.
Vajpayee.
Vajpayee used to eat buffalo meat, and he relished it, and also he used to enjoy his drink, and so. I don't think he would have. He was someone, I said, he had a conventional life and he also had a conventional lifestyle, unconventional lifestyle. So I don't think he would have approved of what was happening around in the name of what someone ate or what someone drank.
Right. Last question, Ullekh, because this has been a fascinating interview. Do you think he, in retrospect, he is a jewel of India?
He represented, he was.
I mean, he is because he's Bharat Ratna.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, ask is.
We can't always, is it that there wasn't anyone far more intelligent than Albert Einstein? There would have been, but he was there and then he became Albert Einstein. So he had the opportunity to be Albert Einstein. So Vajpayee had the opportunity to be Vajpayee because, I called him the father of the second nuclear age.
Yes.
Because he was there at that time, before that, maybe Narasimha Rao lived in a different time where India was going through a lot of economic crisis, and any pressure from the Americans meant that he couldn't have proceeded with the plan to go for
now two people who were prosecuted during the emergency and who had a tough time. One was Vajpayee, the other was Subramaniam Swamy. This is the last question, what was their relationship?
No, Vajpayee
did Vajpayee think of Subramaniam Swamy as a backstabber? Vajpayee
never liked Subramaniam Swamy, but I think the contempt was mutual.
Yes.
And in the meanwhile, Vajpayee did not suffer too much during emergency, and in fact, I write in my book that he tried to engage with the Congress and also had talked with Om Mehta, who was a junior home minister but a very powerful minister.
Yeah, even the RSS wasn't too.
They weren't. Yeah. They weren't. They were looking for an opportunity to wriggle out of the situation and bring back electoral, bring back elections and and get back to normal life.
So right now, as it stands, do you think Vajpayee would have done a lot differently as far as the economy is concerned with a majority that Narendra Modi has? If Vajpayee had right now?
Definitely, despite the kind of pressure from.
I mean, given that the debacles of the previous governments pre-98 and the way he took the economy till 2004, nearly the same thing that Modi has received. I mean, the shambles of UPA 2. If Vajpayee was there in place of Modi, do you think the economic reforms would have been much more
I can only say Vajpayee faced far more serious challenge to his reform oriented moves than Modi now faces from the RSS, or for that matter any feeder organization of the RSS. But he listened to them, but he made sure that he did what he wanted to do.
He was his own man.
Yeah.
Ullekh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a fascinating interview. So I hope you enjoyed that. Remember, when the corporations pay, corporations are served, and when the public pays, public is served. Subscribe to News Laundry. Thank you very much.
If you like that, click here to support us and down here to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and do check out the other stuff we do like News Laundry interviews, Why So Serious, animations, comics, panel discussions, podcasts which are really big, and much, much more.